Can everybody hear me all right? All right, well, don't care. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Wartortell, this is Fuzzynop. We're going to be giving a talk on some targeted malware, our final form of targeted malware, or APTrololol, if you want to call it that. First of all, let's just start with a disclaimer. This work has absolutely nothing to do with our employer, does not reflect the opinions of our employer whatsoever. The purpose of this research was educational and for fun, and because we had cool ideas and we wanted to share them. This should be used for good, so that you know what could be out there and what you should be looking for. We're not condoning going out and writing a bunch of really evil things. So, first let me start with a little bit of a background. Both of us work for a company that investigates targeted attacks. We see what attackers do on a daily basis. There's tons of these attacks happening out there, and we see this. And based on this, we had some interesting insights into what they're doing and what some of the smart things they're doing are, and a lot of the dumb things that they're doing are. And we had some clever ideas in terms of what we wanted to do. So we just kind of wanted to learn more and try some things out, and then we wanted to share it with everybody. So first, let's go with an overview of targeted malware. Targeted malware is not the stuff that you're going to get if you go to the wrong porn site and you're just clicking everything. That's not going to be targeted malware. Targeted malware has very specific goals. It's going to somebody is going to have written it in order to drop it inside of your environment or your specific host, and they're going to have some goals, such as financial goal, where they're trying to steal payment card information if you're taking credit card numbers, or they're going to be doing IP theft, where they're searching for some specific schematics or something along those lines that are in one system on your environment. Or espionage, we've seen things where people are digging through emails because they're looking for some connection between people. These are all more of the goals of targeted stuff. Then there's non-targeted malware, the stuff you do get from random porn that you're watching. So the general goal of non-targeted malware is always financial. It's always ransomware where they're crypto locker, where they're completely encrypting your hard drive and then saying, pay us money and we'll decrypt it, or they're lying about it and not actually encrypting it and just doing shenanigans. Botnets, where they're mining bitcoins with your computer because you don't know their botnet is sitting on there, stuff like that. It's all financial based usually when it's non-targeted. They're just trying to get it on as many processors as they can because the more they have, the more money they potentially can make. So when you're in a scenario where you think you may be targeted by some threat actor, you're probably going to be relieved if you're finding non-targeted stuff, because that's not what you're worried about. When you're worried about targeted stuff, you're worried about somebody stealing your intellectual property or something really relevant to you.
So let's talk about incident response, right? You've got something in your network. You're already in response mode, right? So we wanted to take a different approach. So in the past, you may think of ways to hide malware, right, so that you don't find it. But in our experience, you're going to find it eventually because you know something's wrong with the system. You're going to be on there, right? And there's a lot of evidence left behind. So instead of coming in and trying to hide the malware with clever tactics so that you never find it, the scope that we were playing in is that someone's already found it, right? That's our starting point. Someone's already found it. So let's focus on what happens after it's already found. And we have a demo already. Oh, okay. Demo gods. Okay, here we go. So typically, when you find malware, the first thing you want to do is you always want to take path of least resistance. Find the low-hanging fruit. Find the easy things, right? So what I have here is a dynamic analysis VM. And in here, I have a bunch of tools so that I can drop a piece of malware in and run it and get information about it. I have a couple things running. Over on the left side here is a script that takes DNS requests, HTTP requests, and records them, prints them out for the screen for you. It also records PCAPs so you can look at stuff later. On the right, we have Procmon. Now, there's lots of other tools out here, but these are the two I'm going to use to just show you basic, low-hanging fruit stuff. So on the desktop here, you see demo.exe. That is our malware that we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to clear procmon so that you can easily see what happens. And I'm just going to double click it. So over here in procmon, we see that demo.exe has done some stuff already, right? We see reg set value. A registry key has been set. Cool. That's interesting. Maybe that registry key is important. Maybe not. I mean, who knows? But we also see write file to, I don't know, tool2.exe, tool4, scs1.temp, and another registry. So this random crypto stuff, don't worry about that. That's nothing. So as someone who's interested in, figuring out what's going on in the system or what this piece of malware is, if it's bad, if it's evil, the first step that I would take would be to probably Google it. Also, I forgot to show you, but another first step that sometimes we do and sometimes we don't do is running strings on it, right? Everyone's a reverse engineer when they run strings. So here's the strings of the program. If we scroll through it, we can see that here's some strings, and I think here's our registry key that's set, and here's all this other stuff as well too. So Googling that stuff, trying to find what you have, is the easiest way to go about looking at a piece of malware. Or maybe it's not malware. So if I were to go and Google this stuff, also, is there a DNS request? Yeah, iframetraf.biz. So we could go start Googling these things, the DNS request. So I've Googled the registry key, and I've got 22,000 results. And when I see 22,000 results, I'm like, this has been out there. Lots of people have seen this. This is common. However, the registry key might just be like some artifact that's not evil. So we Google the other things, tool2.exe, a lot of results, but that's kind of generic. This C Windows temp scs1.temp I thought was particularly interesting, and I added virus total to the end because I want the virus total report to it. And if I go ahead and I look at the virus total report, I get information about it, and a virus total is pretty sure it's malware. Typically, when virus total has seen something and it's already pretty sure that it's malware, lots of other people have already seen it, and lots of AV engines already know about it. So this is common malware out there every day. Targeted malware is not the malware that's common malware out there every day. Let's go back. So these were our first steps. We ran strings. We found some strings from everyday malware. We sandboxed it, or we ran it, and we saw actions regarding those strings. We saw registry keys, files, DNS requests, stuff like that. We Googled it, and we're kind of getting the hunch that it's not targeted malware because it's out there. If someone crafted it to target my specific environment, it wouldn't be on virus total in Google with 22,000 results, right? So what's happening here is classic misdirection. This is not the PE you're looking for. Is it malware? Oh yeah, definitely. But it's not what it appears, and you're probably asking yourself, what? However, oh God, it's so beautiful. Oh my, wow. Just take it in.
So what's actually happening here is this is the first form of our malware. What we're doing is we are pretending to be some piece of non-targeted malware to be this classic misdirection. So we're dropping files, and when you're searching for those file names, you don't actually have, you might not actually be checking the MD5s of those, you're just searching for file names, and then virus totals telling you all this information. So we're dropping files, we're doing DNS requests, we're creating registry keys, creating mutexes, putting all of these strings in the binary so that you have all these things to key off of, and if you key off of them, you're gonna have a bad time, basically. So all of this information that all the first things that it's doing are absolutely useless. It's all bad information. And it's all mimicked from virus total. So, next slide. So the problem is we don't want to hard code exactly what we're putting in there. So you don't want to say, oh, let's just hard code some ZooSpot into our sample and then we're good. So what we did is we took we wrote a script that basically, we didn't want to pay for the API keys from VirusTotal, so we just web scraped VirusTotal for behavioral information. And we are pulling a ton of behavioral information about random non-targeted malware from VirusTotal. And what we did was we created this big JSON object that we can recompile every time we want a new piece of malware, and it's going to randomly pick behaviors from a specific piece of non-targeted malware. Wow, damn, slow clap already. There we go. All right, yeah, and fast clap, love it. So what it's going to do is we can recompile every time and just shove in that behavioral information, and it's really easy to do, and you're going to be keying off of the wrong information each time. So after that, we don't want you to immediately be able to see, oh, well, it does that stuff, and then it does this other stuff. Like, we want this misdirection to hit, and then for you to not have whatever the actual goal of the malware is. So then we do a little bit of math. So typical malware, a typical malware thing to do is to sleep for a while, so that, you know, if you drop it into a sandbox, usually a sandbox will run for like 5 minutes, and then it will possibly, and then it'll stop it, finish its execution. However, it's not really long enough to get, you can easily subvert that by just sleeping for a while. However, sandboxes will do things like they'll hook the sleep function and make it not work whatsoever anymore. So sleep doesn't actually sleep anymore. So what we did is a combination of sleep and math, where for a little while we're sleeping, and then for a little while we're actually just calculating primes for God knows how, for a certain amount of time. And we switch back and forth so that that specific technique won't inhibit us from being able to hide what we're doing. And, yeah, take that one in too, you're welcome. Obviously though, this, if this is happening in an environment and that you have like NetFlow traffic or something along those lines, or this is like a targeted attack and you're stealing data, you're going to have like somebody monitoring your network traffic and saying, oh, like I see terabytes of data leaving, like there's still something wrong with that host, like there's something really evil going on here. So it's very possible that somebody is going to say like, hey, we need to do more analysis on that host. And one of two things can happen. The analyst who said, oh, it's non-targeted, could say, oh no, like I'm 100% sure it had these strings, we're sure. If they're a little smarter, they're going to say like, all right, let's kick this up to like a reverse engineer and have him fully reverse this piece of malware.
Right. So even though we thought that the first reaction would be to disregard things, like we're going to have to still protect it from the guy who's going to take a closer look. So that leads us into armoring malware, right? And we had lots of options when we thought about, hey, okay, what's the second stage? What do we want to do to thwart people when they're starting to look at it already? And we have a lot of options available. We have packers, cryptors, obfuscators. All of these things make the binary harder to analyze from a low-level binary assembly language level. However, we also have like anti-VM stuff, which is going to make it harder to do your dynamic analysis. We also have anti-disassembly, which makes it even harder to look at it in IDA. Or junk code, red herring code, things that inflate the binary and just give you a lot of garbage to look through. So we thought there was a couple problems with this. One is it may raise red flags, and it may cause situations in where the first person who would have discarded it, and it would actually be discarded, and no one would ever pick it up again, that it would instantly raise red flags, and they'd think, oh man, we need to pass this off to somebody who really knows more than me because I can't do anything with it. And we don't want it to have to mandate attention.
I just wanted to say, like, the other thing about like packers and cryptors and things like that is there's a lot of antivirus tools out there that'll immediately flag something the second they see that it's packed. Even if it's something as simple as UPX pack, they'll say, hey, you should check this out, this could be bad.
Yeah, totally. And so also like this stuff, it's out there already, and we wanted to do something a little more simple and a little more fun. So we didn't want to like write the next gen cryptor because that's really hard too. So okay. Let's pretend we're that guy and we're taking a closer look with Machamp, right? Do you see what I did there? Okay, so, all right, everyone can read that, right? No. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the main function to the malware that we just ran, and we're looking at it in IDA, and it's kind of a little messy, but it's not too bad. So
Schwartz, let me cut in.
Yeah.
So like, just so everybody knows where we're going with this, if you're not reverse engineers, like IDA Pro is like the most widely used reverse engineering tool out there. It's a disassembler that is really interactive, really easy to use, and that's why we want to show you like what a reverse engineer would probably do and exactly what they're going to run into.
And when he says easy to use, he means in relation to looking at the bytes without this tool.
Yeah, if you like zeros and ones, go for it,
Right.
but I don't.
So one of our first things that we would typically do when we start looking at a random piece of malware or something we suspect to be is just kind of trace down through main and see what it does. Now, in the interest of time, I've already commented some of these function calls, and we can like drill into them just by double clicking. And here we have an API call to create mutex. So that's our fake stuff, right? And we're going to see a lot of this fake stuff here. Down here we have registry calls. Inside here we got reg create key. We even were silly, like many malware authors are, and leave your debugging strings in there. We actually see that all the time. We didn't do that on purpose, but once it was in there, we thought, yeah, why not?
Yeah, we got a laugh out of it earlier today because we realized it about 2 hours ago.
Yeah. Okay, so as you're tracing down through here and you're exploring the different function calls, at one point, you're going to realize that the stuff that it does instantly, this non-targeted malware stuff that it's done, is actually, and if you look at it close, you're just going to see it's a string pushed on, it creates the red key, and it doesn't do anything with it later. It doesn't really care about it. It moves on, and it moves into this area down here where there's a bunch of really ugly stuff. And I've already marked up some of it. So instead of the bytes here, you see the alphabet. And we'll get to what's exactly happening here later. But there's this giant mess. You'll probably scroll past it. And down here, you see all the API calls to create at least a connection to somewhere, right? You got WSA startup, WSA socket, init adder. These are standard things in Windows that you see over and over and over again. And you see the call to connect, and then you also see create process, and right here is CMD, and that's being passed into create process. And what ends up happening is that the target of this, the IP address that's put in there, gets a reverse shell. So let's back out. Now there's some other functions, and we can drill into them. And
let me cut in for a second,
yeah, sure.
Fuzzy. The thing that you should take away from this is from that reverse shell function that we just showed you, you'd get down to the bottom of it, and you're going to see that reverse shell functionality. You're going to see it calling create process with command, which is very, very generic, exactly like the process of creating a reverse shell.
Right.
So that is going to be what a reverse engineer would key off of and say, oh, yeah, I found a reverse shell. Cool. Let's go backwards from here and see exactly where it's going to and figuring out what it's doing from that.
Right, so you find the reverse shell and you feel like a winner, man. You're like, ha, it's not this non-targeted stuff from VirusTotal. It's not this stuff that you saw, first guy who looked at it. It's a reverse shell. I'm really smart, and I've solved it. And it does create the fake evidence, but if you reverse the whole thing, and you didn't see it, but it takes a password that's 0x383D3D44. You can figure that out. It's also obfuscated and ugly because we want the reverse engineer to work for it a little bit. We want them to work and feel accomplished, right? This is the meat, and it tastes like victory, and you're like, yes. However, classic misdirection. Oh, again, this isn't the PE you think it is now, right? Is it a backdoor? Yes, and it works. So you could use it as a reverse shell, but it's actually not what it appears. And again, you're probably like, what? God, it's so beautiful. So this is our second form now, right? A wild reverse shell appears, and the strings are obfuscated. So in the first stage, you're not going to find them when you run strings. And the sleep functionality is obfuscated too, and we'll talk about those things. However, first, I just want to point out one little thing. I had always thought that if you turned on all the compiler optimizations when you're writing code, and you compile it in Visual Studio, the output you got was really, really hard to look at in IDA. So on the right is the graph that we were looking at a moment ago. And that is actually with no compiler optimizations on at all. I don't know if anyone else is surprised by that, but I was surprised by that a day or two ago. And on the left is actually all compiler optimizations turned on. It's actually a very linear flow where it comes down through and it hits all the API calls that we were looking at before. And it's actually a little bit less work. So we turn the compiler optimizations off just because we're mean. So putting the fun in functions, right? The sleep stuff we were talking about before where we had this long delay, and it's actually right after the reverse shell stuff. When we first compiled it, we had this sleep function where it's sleep 20 and it's in a loop, and it calculates primes and sleeps some more and it's in a loop some more. I thought that was too obvious that the malware was sleeping for a long time and that someone might like patch it or something like that. So instead, I made a bunch of helper functions, sleep 1, sleep 2, up to like sleep 8 or something like that. Each one of these takes in 5 arguments. Each of the arguments gets XORed with each other. They get added together. They get, like, a lot of stuff happens. And it's all random. And it doesn't really mean anything or do anything. And they each call sleep a little bit. So hopefully that stops someone from seeing like, hey, like it's sleeping and just patching that. Also, the string obfuscation you saw before. Okay, I think I got this one, yeah. The string obfuscation, I messed this up like earlier a couple times. The string obfuscation you saw before is the difference between these two statements, right? When you have car*, your variable name, and then you define it right there, you end up getting a string that shows up in strings. You end up getting a string that shows up in IDA. However, when you define it like this as an array of characters, it actually has to push everything onto the stack one at a time. Did I get that right? Yeah, nice.
So the general point of that is like, if you do it in that way, it's going to be a lot. It's a lot uglier to reverse. Like most of the time, you'll have to have some script in IDA, or you're going to have to do a little more work in order to figure out what these strings are. And they're not going to show up in generic tools that maybe somebody that's not a reverse engineer would use. But anyways, so at this point, this isn't even really our final form. Obviously, yeah, there's a reverse shell. Like, you have a reverse engineer in there. He's saying, oh, yeah, patting himself on the back. Like, I did a good job today. I found this reverse shell. However, nah, that's not actually what we do. So let's switch gears. Can anybody tell me which of these metapods is worse? So this is kind of a trick question because what's happening here is you're actually looking at shellcode right now. What we did here is we have actually decided, hey, we've never seen an icon for an executable contain the shellcode that it actually wants to run. So we did that. So PE files actually have icons in their resource section. It's really easy to add. There's a lot of different formats that are allowed, bitmaps, ICOs, PNGs, a bunch of stuff. And it's totally legitimate. Like, there's the Skype icon, or there's the uTorrent icon. Like, all of that's completely legitimate. It's not so legitimate to shove shellcode in there. So you may be thinking, what? So I'm sure a lot of people here have like heard of steganography or messed with it, done some CTFs, you run into it. So what we've done here is we decided, like, hey, you know, you never really see stego in the real world. Like, that'd be kind of funny. Like, let's do that for the lulz. So basically, stego is the process of like hiding messages in plain sight. So you're looking at some data and you think that it is completely normal, but there's actually something hidden there. It's usually like image files or some kind of like weird messages. So I'm gonna. You want to do this? No problem. Yeah, I animated so hard. All right, so basically, I'm going to show you exactly how we inserted a stego. So with what we wanted to do, we had shellcode, and we also had our icon file. So if you take your, if you take your shellcode and break it down into its binary format, and then you look at your icon, it's actually there are different sizes you can use. We were using like a 64 by 64 pixel icon. The icon is a 24-bit bitmap, meaning that each pixel is represented by 3 bytes. If you look at one of those color formats, so those 3 bytes represent RGB. If you look at like the red layer, you can look at that single byte and say, hey, I want to hide something in that. And then the question is, how do you do that without making it really obvious? So what I have seen before is an image file inside of a resource section where it's just like, here's an image file, and it's just crap. Like, it looks like basically random noise. So we don't want to do that. We want to do this a little more cleverly. So what you can do is you can take, instead of just like filling the image with your shellcode, let's just take the least significant bit of a single layer of a single pixel and change it. And that's more along the lines of steganography. So with a 64 by 64, you have 4,096 pixels. We're hiding 1 bit of our shellcode per pixel, which means we can hide 512 bytes of shellcode. And we're just shoving each of those bits into the icon. Yeah, I told you I animated so hard. You're welcome.
It's okay. He's using harden. He's fine. He's fine.
So the point here is that we're shoving all of the shellcode into the icon file, and those two icon files you look at, you're not going to see the difference. Like when you're changing the least significant bit of a single layer of a single pixel, you can't see it. I mean, you could probably come up with some tools to like say, oh, these like least significant bits look interesting, but you're not going to see it just by looking at it. And that was kind of what we were after. So just to demonstrate how ridiculously simple this is in order to implement in your malicious binary, this is the code, like to actually pull out your shellcode from an icon. The first half of it is actually like, yeah, I can't point. The first half of it is really simple. That's all API calls. I won't lie, I ripped that from some other sample. Basically what we're doing with that is just ripping a resource out of the resource section of a binary, and you're loading it into an array. And then the second half is 2 loops, and that's all you have to do in order to like walk through and recreate your shellcode. After that, all you have to do is call it. Like, it's that simple. So you've noticed I haven't said anything about our shellcode. Like, that's because we didn't write any shellcode. It's not really necessary. There's tons of it on the internet. Like, you can do whatever the hell you want with it. Basically, we got online and I said, like, Googled Windows PE shellcode and found like a download and execute shellcode. We could have written our own. It would have taken a little longer, but why? I mean, and there's tons of shellcode out there that is really, really small, and a lot of people use it. So we found a download and execute shellcode that will basically download an executable from a URL and immediately execute it. It'll save it somewhere on the hard drive and immediately execute it. You can do that in less than, it's about 220 bytes, and there's a lot of ways to simplify it. You could do it even smaller. And like I said, if you're willing to give up some of your hiding, you could do it, you can have up to, if you do a big icon, you could have probably, a couple of kilobytes of shellcode that you can hide into these icons. Like,
right. So another thing I'd like to point out is you're probably thinking like, of course I'm not going to look at the icon and think there's shellcode in there. I'm going to look at the binary. And like, you're right, yeah. And we were thinking of lots of really, really, really clever ways to hide it. For now, we're using the same technique that we did with the sleep function. I don't think we have slides for this. We can demo. We actually have a lot of time. Let's do more demo. Okay. So here we are back in IDA. I know everyone's so excited about this. It's super fun. I actually put this eat, sleep, rave, repeat string here just so I could find the function, because it was getting lost earlier and I was lazy. This would not be in the final form, in case you were wondering. But if we start to drill into this function, you know how I said before how like sleep calls another sleep and it just like keeps going on? Well, I also wrote like 10 stego functions, and each one calls another one of those. And at a certain point in this giant chain, it looks kind of like this. So I'm just going to be like, all right, I'm not going to pay attention. I just want to see what's down in here. And like we start drilling into this one, and okay, there's no API calls there. So we come back and we drill into this one, and there's 2 here. And you're like, okay, and there's all this other math, and we hit this. And I don't know what I'm doing. This is dog science at the moment. Here's actually one of our sleep calls, which if you see, you're like, oh, it sleeps for a second, whatever. And then you're like, XOR stuff, oh my God, that's scary. So maybe you spend like 2 hours reversing this, and really I'm just like taking the arguments and throwing them around, XORing them together, or passing them into the next function. So you're like, oh, okay, and I follow the next function. Next function. I don't know if we'll actually find the the code we're looking for or not. Oh God, yes, we did. Stego my ego. I put that string there so that I could find this one also, if in case I couldn't like get lucky and drill down into it.
Except he forgot about it.
Yeah. So here's our code that does the stego stuff. Now at this point, we have plans for the future, but like for right now, we just dumped it down in there, so it wasn't immediately obvious. However, some of the things we could do is, one, we could get rid of these API calls. There's lots of ways to do that. You can manually load the DLL. You can manually implement get proc address, so that now this stuff kind of looks like more math instead of like API calls. So the whole time you're gonna have to keep reversing stuff, and you're gonna have to like reverse each function until you get down to this, and then this one you like notice some magic number that is like an offset into the PE header, and you're like, oh, now this is interesting. It's a lot of work. I mean, is it possible? Yeah. Like someone looks at this long enough, they'll find it, but you're gonna work for it.
Yeah, so. One of the things like that's worth mentioning is in reverse engineering, pretty much if you're willing to put in the time and effort into it, like a reverse engineer can figure out what's happening if they have the time and effort to put into it.
Right.
So the goal of this is misdirection and lulls also, but.
Yeah, and also instead of having like really simple shellcode that gets pulled out of that icon, we could have like a bigger image resource, and we could put like a packed binary in there, so that now after all this work, you get another packed binary, and you're like, oh man, God, these guys. So. Let's see. The other thing I want to possibly get back to, if I can, is the reverse shell stuff. Remember that string obfuscation? So this is the init call of a like character array, right? And I just initialized A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. And the next one I just initialized a bunch of null bytes. And then there's actually one that you care about here, and that's the password. However, I made 4 character arrays. And each character array gets initialized, and then each byte that after it's initialized gets set to something. And I'll probably just show you the source code. It's easier. Yeah, so it looks like this. Here's the This is the initialization, and it doesn't have to be characters; just be numbers, right? And I like put some strings in there, like kernel32.dll, because why not? Like. And then I do everything out of order. And I probably could take some more time to randomize this even further, or add like 20 different variables. And inside there is if you follow it appropriately, inside there, the password is actually the 0x383d3d44. However, IDA tries to keep track of these different variables on the stack, but it has trouble understanding what the difference between like a character array is and like a string, because like they're each a pointer, right? So when it comes down here to the string compare, and I've named this password. So like in IDA, you can hit N and you can name something so that you can follow it through the disassembly. I've named it password, and the hopes, I think if I did it linearly, what would happen is you'd see like password and then immediately after the password. But instead what happens is you get, this is named password and it's equal to 0, and this is named password and it's a null byte, and the rest IDA doesn't know what's going on. And it's just like, really, really simple. I was like, you know what? I don't want these strings in here, and I'm going to take the path of least resistance from the making malware side, and it ended up being kind of effective. I would not want to have to undo this. So, okay. Yeah. Tell them about the scripts.
All right.
The question was that since we're talking about math anyways, I think he's implying that instead of calculating primes, we should be mining bitcoins in there.
I fully agree with you, and I happily will let you implement that for me.
It's a great idea, sir. Thank you.
Please do. So expect a lot of fun patches, especially with bitcoins. So just to like reiterate, like we wanted this to be an automated process so that you have like, you want to, create a new piece of malware every single time. Like instead of like, you don't want to go through and modify your code and compile, go through, modify your code. We want it to be like a simple process. So what we did was we have our script for automatically scraping VirusTotal, and that, you can go through and throw more MD5s into that, get stuff from VirusTotal however you want, and web scrape all of that into just a big JSON object that we're holding. And then what we're also doing is we have another script that's our builder script that kind of is like, let's put everything together. So what it does is it takes a random behavior set from that JSON object, and it shoves it into our malware source code. It then compiles the malware, and then you can also specify, this is what I want the icon to be, and here's what I want the shell code to be. And then it'll actually like stego that icon shove it into the resource section, and then you actually have your, super evil binary that you can do what you want with.
So as a neat idea, right, you're in a target environment, you're in there, right? And you have the backdoor, you have this functionality that you want to use, but you don't want someone to be able to find it once and then just be like, oh, I'll just look for it everywhere. So you could just create I don't know, 30 of these, and they're all different, and they all have different, DNS requests, and they all do different things. So that's not very nice of us, huh?
So yeah, that currently is our final form, but for now, we have lots of other fun ideas that we want to go ahead with, and different ways to hide things, and different ways to make it more of a pain to deal with these kind of things. And
also, can you guys believe that we wanted a Nick Cage face on Frieza in his final form, and the internet didn't deliver? We had to get this custom made. Yeah.
Yup.
Internet, come on.
So, questions? Yeah.
So if you're adding things that look like real malware, how much, as obfuscation, how much does that increase the chance that you'll be detected by dumb antiviruses and other malware protections?
Yeah, so we're adding things that look like real malware, right? So if you're talking about full weaponization and actually using it, yeah, you have other concerns, right? You may want to make things that look similar to malware but aren't going to trip signatures. But earlier in the talk, we kind of wanted to cut that off and be like, okay, just assume you're going to get caught anyways. Just assume someone's going to find it. Hopefully AV doesn't sig on it. My AV didn't.
What I'd bring up is there's a lot of ways that we can do things to randomize the functionality of what we're doing, because not all, it's all small modular pieces that don't have a lot of specific functionality to themselves. So there's a lot of ways that we could avoid things like AV SIGs and stuff like that. Even though we currently aren't getting hit by SIGs, and the stuff that's on our systems is pretty ugly and mean in terms of grabbing everything.
I really like this one.
Yeah.
But we're seeing a lot of anti-discovery techniques like VM detection. In your experience, have you seen targets against clients that run virtualization as part of their business model, but still try to evade detection through that vector?
In general, we don't see that much. I would actually say it's really rare. I've seen maybe 1 or 2 samples, and I've been reverse engineering for about a year, reverse engineering malware for about a year for a company I'm currently at. So it's
right.
Pretty rare.
Malware authors are smart, right?
Businesses have moved over to virtualization.
Right.
The only people that generally would be using virtualization in this context would be malware or etc.
Yeah, so anti-VM stuff you don't see whatsoever anymore, really. I'm sorry, I thought your question was more along the lines of packers that actually virtualize the malware. But if you're talking about anti-virtualization, doing checks to see if you see virtualization device strings, really, really rare. Because you'll run into things where, oh, this is the system that I want to hit, here's the data that I want to hit, my malware fails on that system, because it's a virtualized environment.
Yeah. Actually, one thing that might be interesting is to bring that old nostalgia back of doing VM checks, right? And you have 2 copies of the malware, one for inside your VM and one for outside your VM, and they're all really, really different when you look at them in assembly level language, but they actually do the same thing.
Yeah, it's actually something that we kind of included. It's funny that you asked this. Some of the strings that I like to include for non-targeted stuff, because non-targeted stuff will commonly check anti-VM for virtualization stuff. So in the strings that we're including, we're doing things let's check for VMware and VirtualBox and QEMU. And if you see any of those, don't do anything. But those strings are in there so that you might key off of them and say, oh, this is non-targeted.
Right, because mass malware doesn't want to get thrown into a sandbox and caught. They really care about that.
Have you ever thought about, rather than doing the steganography piece, but actually pulling bytes out of the files that are already on the file system
We have a lot of fun ideas in terms of different ways to hide the shellcode in the end. I have a very comical idea that I want to do that involves strings that would be really fun to do. And definitely, yeah, that would be one fun way to do it. I think that would be a little bit harder because you're going to throw a lot of API calls around that you would have to then hide and things like that, and you would have to be searching for specific stuff like that.
I actually really like that idea because you think you have right. You have all these files that typically get called and you typically see when you're in Procmon. And you're like, oh, it's just doing DLL loading, like it's nothing to worry about. But actually, like it's pulling handles of those files and it's pulling specific bytes to generate your shellcode out of those. Like,
yeah, actually, in reference to that, there's a really cool paper you might be interested in called Frankenstein, I believe, that was a colleague of mine, and he did basically something that is how to piece malware together from benign software. And that was like his general idea, like let's take all of these different pieces and shove them together, and then you have like something evil at the end. Vishwath Mohan.
Did you get that?
I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you afterwards.
More questions? No. Are we at the end? Okay. All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, they went the extra effort there.